So what I want to talk about today is trying to find another way to understand when NFRs apply. So NFRs are non-functional requirements, and they are the things that describe the constraints or what it takes to make a system, and it could be a software system or something else, but a system to make it actually work outside of the business requirements, right? It doesn't help me if I build a system that implements really well some bidding scheme in an auction site if I don't protect people's data, or I can't scale it to the size of the auction, right? Or a ticket site or something like that. So what I want to talk about is what are some of the ways one of the ways maybe we could figure out when non-functional requirements apply. The classic way we do non-functional requirement categorization, I call those the enterprise architecture categories, because it feels like where they came from. And those are the ilities. Hey, we came up with this scheme, a grammar or taxonomy for how we look at non-functional requirements, and we bucket or group like-minded NFRs with each other, and that's great. And that's really good for training people about NFRs, where you can sweep a category like security and go, hey man, are all the security non-functional requirements? Are these the observability requirements? Like I've got 5 different NFRs for observability, that kind of thing. And then the question is, if I'm writing a feature or I'm writing some requirements, how do I tell somebody which of those apply at any given time? I worked on a project, we had like 65 NFRs, right? And I kind of think it was the minimum. We didn't really go into it deeply, but am I going to expect people to go through all 65? And that's cool, we could do that, but what's one of the way I could assist people doing feature or technical feature refinement? So what I'm going to propose is that we take the NFRs, we have the legitimate enterprise architecture, well understood categories for non-functional requirements, and I'm going to say that we look at all of our deployable components or general deliverable types. I put these as component categories, but maybe they should be delivery categories. And the simple ones I have here are API, persistence, messaging, and metrics. And there's way more than that. So API might be like a web endpoint, something that another team can call. Persistence would be like a database, any kind of persistence, blob store, those kinds of things. Messaging would be like streaming and messaging. I'm trying not to pick any products. It could be cloud-based or something you install. And metrics would basically be like OKRs, metrics, dashboards. Those could be operational. They could be business dashboards. I didn't really qualify that here. So the notion is you can take a set of NFRs and decide for which of these component categories it applies. So for instance, encrypting data at rest, right? Well, encrypting data at rest, it could, but I'm going to claim right now, encrypting data at rest applies for messaging because it actually has its own persistence store, and it applies for database. And since all my API components are transient, they are ephemeral, that means they don't have any storage, and there's never anything at rest. Although some would argue it in memory is at rest. We could think about that. But in that case, a particular NFR about data needs to be encrypted at rest would apply to persistence and messaging, right? It was categorized under security, but we actually know what kind of components it applies to, right? Another NFR might need all schemas must be registered. Well, if we said schemas are database schemas, right, then that NFR would be a governance NFR from the EA category, but would actually apply to any persistence store. And in my case, where I have worked in the past, it applied to messaging schemas, right? So the idea is you take a set of NFRs and you categorize them in the classic fashion, and then you create a second set of categories, and and it could be multiple, right? A given NFR, as you see here, could apply, like the top one applies in for API and for messaging, so that, like I said, that one might be, the schemas need to be registered because that's a governance requirement. And so we just quickly do that, right? And so NFRs might apply to multiple areas. And then when we go to define a feature, those features actually get bound to deliverables. And so if we knew kind of when we're creating the feature, oh, this is going to be a microservice and it's going to have a database, or this is a microservice with no database, then we knew which component category. A microservice is always an API, right? So whatever would apply for a microservice is going to be the API category. And anything that applies to a database would be persistence, and messaging has a little bit of API and a little bit of persistence in it. So we would have made sure that the NFRs, the right F and NFRs went to messaging, and then when we built the messaging system, we would get the right mix of NFRs, at least as a first pass in the requirements. So that's the idea. The idea is, how do I aid business product owners when they're creating features and when the architects or teams are doing technical refinement? How do I simplify the notion of assigning NFRs to those, or at least give them a first pass when the number of NFRs is going to continually to grow? And also, some of those NFRs may not apply yet. So one of the other advantages of this, I might have an NFR for some capability that we're not going to put in till next year. I just would not put that on the API right now, right? I would put it on the API later, but that way, anyway, so you get the idea, right? We could actually evolve which NFRs apply to which component categories and track that. And then that might create technical debt where we picked up some new NFRs, but the idea is give everybody a shot without having to be an expert at understanding what NFRs might apply in any given situation. And I'm going to argue that the simplest way to do that is to bind them to component or delivery types. And that way, when somebody's designing a feature with a certain component or delivery type, they get first pass at what NFRs are available. So I hope that's useful, and I hope you're using NFRs to shake out all the non-business requirements in your system, or the bulk of them, and that will give you a leg up on a lot of people who kind of do this in an ad hoc fashion. Have a great day.